For most of human history, generating light was a laborious hands-on task. But as cities grew and commerce expanded, pressure increased to make night. Early attempts at illuminating urban spaces involved residents being ordered to hang lanterns outside their homes on certain nights, a patchy effort demonstrating a slow recognition that lighting could be a shared responsibility. These initial measures were often limited to inns, markets, and busy crossroads, where oil lamps required constant tending. By the 17th and 18th centuries, some European cities began installing coordinated systems of street lamps, typically fueled by whale oil or vegetable oils. The expense necessitated special taxes, creating a public service with its own visible workforce, lamplighters and cleaners who diligently trimmed wicks, lit each lamp, and extinguished them again daily. This new form of urban work also symbolized the growing organization of municipal life. The impact was immediate. Streets became safer to navigate, encouraging some people to venture out after dark. Businesses extended their hours, creating a longer day for both commerce and labor. While not universally welcomed, some residents disliked paying these taxes or felt that brighter nights disturbed natural rhythms. The shift marked an important change in urban life. Authorities also recognized the benefit of better visibility for policing, allowing them to monitor public spaces more closely. The arrival of gas lighting in the early 19th century brought a new level of brightness. Instead of individual oil lamps, gas flowed through underground pipes to lamps that burned more evenly and required fewer workers. The glow was stronger than previous systems, transforming theaters, boulevards, and shop windows into evening attractions. Night began to feel like an extension of daytime city life rather than a separate, shadowy world. The shift to gas lighting also brought new challenges. While brighter than oil lamps, early gas systems were prone to leaks and explosions, requiring constant maintenance and careful regulation by city authorities. The smell of gas was pervasive, a characteristic odor that became associated with urban environments, but often drew complaints from residents. Furthermore, the construction of underground pipe networks proved disruptive, necessitating extensive excavation and temporary inconvenience for citizens. Despite these drawbacks, the increased illumination fostered new forms of public entertainment. Theaters benefited enormously, extending performance hours and attracting larger audiences. Similarly, shops and businesses could remain open later, catering to a population increasingly accustomed to evening activity. This extended commercial day also impacted labor patterns, as some workers found themselves employed during nighttime shifts in factories or other establishments, seeking to capitalize on the longer operating hours made possible by gaslight. The social impact was not uniform. While many welcomed the increased safety and vibrancy of illuminated streets, others expressed concerns about noise levels and a perceived decline in traditional nocturnal rhythms. Newspaper articles from the period reveal ongoing debates regarding the appropriate level of street lighting, with some advocating for dimmer lights to preserve tranquility, while others championed brighter illumination as essential for public order. The earliest forms of public illumination appeared in the ancient world, primarily as a means of security. Roman cities employed oil lamps to light streets and paths, serving both to prevent accidents and deter potential criminals. A person responsible for lighting these lamps in front of villas was known as a lanternarius. Similar practices existed within ancient Greek civilizations. These early lamps provided a moderate flame and offered a relatively long-lasting light source, though their effectiveness was limited compared to later innovations. The Roman approach to street lighting reflected the priorities of the time, safety and order above all else. While these lights did contribute to nighttime visibility, They weren't intended to create a vibrant atmosphere. The reliance on oil lamps meant that illumination would have been intermittent and likely dependent upon available resources and labor. Romans illuminated their streets with oil lamps, while cities like Baghdad and Cordoba followed suit, highlighting the widespread adoption of this technology across various cultures, a contrast to later periods in European history where darkness was more prevalent. Maintaining these lamps presented practical challenges beyond resource availability. The quality of light produced varied depending on the type of oil used and the lamp's construction, leading to inconsistent illumination. Constant attention was required, wicks needed trimming, reservoirs refilling, and glass chimneys replaced. This labor-intensive process underscored the dependence on individuals like the lanternari, whose role extended beyond simply lighting lamps but also included their upkeep and repair. Specialized workshops sometimes existed to manufacture oil lamps, suggesting a degree of industrial organization surrounding this essential service. The cost of maintaining such a system was not insignificant, placing a burden on municipal budgets and often necessitating public funding. While Roman authorities generally funded street lighting, the system's efficiency was hampered by corruption or mismanagement. Some lanternari were accused of skimming oil or accepting bribes to overlook damaged lamps. In larger cities like Rome itself, multiple competing groups of lanternari existed, sometimes leading to disputes over territory and clientele that occasionally disrupted lighting schedules. The reliance on readily available but often inconsistent fuel sources also presented challenges. Olive oil was preferred for its cleaner burn, but cheaper alternatives like sesame or rendered animal fats were frequently used when cost considerations outweighed performance. This variability in fuel quality directly impacted the brightness and longevity of the lamps, contributing to fluctuating levels of nighttime illumination across Roman settlements. The lanternari often formed guilds, regulating their trade and ensuring a baseline level of service quality, though variations undoubtedly existed between cities and neighborhoods. This highlights an early form of municipal oversight regarding public services, driven by practical necessity rather than formalized structures. The transition from Roman settlements to medieval Europe saw a marked shift in nighttime illumination. While the Romans had employed oil lamps for security and trade, the subsequent centuries witnessed a continuation of this reliance on readily available fuels, albeit with varying degrees of effectiveness. The primary sources of light remained oil lamps and candles, fulfilling similar purposes, protecting travelers and enabling some level of commerce after dark. These lights served as both deterrents against potential threats and practical aids for those navigating increasingly shadowy streets. Oil lamps were the predominant technology throughout this period. Like their Roman predecessors, these lamps provided a moderate but persistent flame. The quality of the oil itself significantly impacted performance. While olive oil was preferred due to its cleaner burn, cheaper alternatives like rendered animal fats were frequently substituted when cost dictated. This variability meant that the brightness and longevity of illumination fluctuated considerably across different towns and neighborhoods. Candles also saw use, though their limited duration made them less suitable for widespread public lighting compared to lamps fueled by oils. The need for consistent nighttime illumination spurred the emergence of a specialized labor force. Similar to the Roman lanternari, individuals were tasked with lighting and maintaining these sources of light. The role of link boys became particularly prominent in medieval towns. They escorted people through dark, winding streets, providing both guidance and a measure of safety. This practice highlights a practical response to limited public illumination, essentially outsourcing personal security alongside the provision of light itself, while not formally organized like Roman guilds. These lighting laborers played an essential role in facilitating nighttime activity within urban spaces. The practice of employing link boys extended beyond simply escorting individuals. It also contributed to a nascent form of localized security provision. While not formally organized, these laborers often possessed knowledge of the streets and potential hazards, acting as informal observers within their designated areas. The emergence of this role highlights an adaptation to limited illumination, a practical response that intertwined personal safety with the provision of light itself. Accounts from the period suggest that some link boys were employed by merchants or wealthier residents to ensure safe passage for themselves and their families, further blurring the lines between private security and public service. In larger towns, variations in the system arose. While some link boys operated independently, others were integrated into more structured arrangements under the supervision of local authorities or guilds. The effectiveness of this system, however, remained dependent on factors such as the availability of link boys, their diligence, and the overall level of vigilance within a community. Despite these limitations, the presence of lighting laborers underscored the ongoing effort to mitigate the risks associated with nighttime activity in medieval urban environments. As towns grew and trade intensified, the demand for safe passage after dark increased, prompting further refinements in lighting practices and the roles that supported them. The need for illumination also spurred innovation. While oil lamps remained dominant, experimentation with alternative fuels and lamp designs continued, albeit incrementally, seeking to improve brightness and efficiency within the constraints of available technology. The challenges of navigating Paris after dark were long-standing. Prior to the 16th century, illumination relied on individual efforts and private arrangements, often involving link boys guiding travelers through dimly lit streets. As urban areas expanded and commerce intensified, the need for a more organized approach to nighttime safety became increasingly apparent. Early attempts at public lighting involved oil lamps, but their effectiveness was limited by factors such as fuel availability and maintenance. The late 1500s marked a turning point with an innovation that would begin to shape Parisian nights. In 1588, the Parliament of Paris issued a decree mandating the placement of torches at intersections throughout the city. This represented a formal step toward public illumination, signifying a recognition by authorities of the need for improved nighttime visibility and safety. The decision wasn't simply about providing light. It was an attempt to address concerns about crime and accidents within the increasingly crowded urban environment. However, this initial system using torches proved imperfect. Torches required constant tending, were susceptible to wind and rain, and posed a fire risk. The decree itself did not detail how these torches would be funded or maintained, leaving implementation somewhat reliant on local resources and initiative. Just 6 years later, in 1594, the city shifted its approach, replacing the torches with lanterns. This change signaled an evolution beyond the temporary nature of burning torches toward a more sustainable form of public lighting. While the specific design of these early lanterns remains undocumented within the available evidence, their adoption suggests an effort to create a more reliable and consistent source of illumination at key locations throughout Paris. The transition from torches to lanterns was not instantaneous. It likely occurred gradually as resources allowed for the replacement of existing torches with new lantern installations. This shift in policy demonstrated a growing commitment to public safety and marked the beginning of organized street lighting in Paris, setting the stage for further developments in the years that followed. The transition from torches to lanterns represented a modest improvement, but challenges remained. The available evidence suggests these early Parisian lanterns were likely simple constructions, possibly utilizing tallow or oil as fuel sources, though specific details regarding their design and construction are absent. Maintaining these lanterns also presented ongoing difficulties. Individuals were responsible for lighting and extinguishing the lamps each day, a task that required diligence and reliability. As noted in an account from 1698, streets were lit all winter and even during the full moon, indicating a commitment to continuous illumination despite varying natural light conditions. This practice necessitated a constant supply of fuel and personnel dedicated to their upkeep. King Louis XIV's reforms in 1667 further formalized this system, authorizing both installation and maintenance alongside penalties for vandalism or theft, signifying an increased investment in public lighting infrastructure. By the late 17th century, Paris boasted over 2,700 streetlights, a number that doubled by 1730, demonstrating a notable expansion of the network. The positioning of these lanterns, suspended 20 yards apart at a height of 20 feet, suggested an effort to maximize illumination across roadways while also considering pedestrian safety and visibility. An English visitor's enthusiastic observation in 1698 highlighted the impact of this expanded lighting on the city's atmosphere, noting that streets were illuminated even under moonlight. Prior to Louis XIV's reign, Parisian streets were illuminated by a haphazard collection of oil lamps, their effectiveness limited by fuel supply and maintenance inconsistencies. The King's reforms in 1667 formalized this system, authorizing both installation and maintenance alongside penalties for vandalism or theft, a significant investment in public lighting infrastructure. These changes represented more than just an increase in the number of lights. They signaled a deliberate effort to improve urban safety and enhance the city's image. By the late 1600s, Paris boasted over 2,700 streetlights, a figure that doubled by 1730. The positioning of these lanterns, suspended 20 yards apart at a height of 20 feet, suggested an effort to maximize illumination across roadways while also considering pedestrian safety and visibility. This deliberate placement demonstrated a move towards systematic urban planning regarding public services. The reforms extended beyond mere quantity. Attention was paid to design. While specifics remain largely undocumented, the increased number and standardized positioning indicated a shift towards more efficient and reliable illumination. An English visitor, in 1698, observed that streets were illuminated even under moonlight, a testament to the improved visibility afforded by Louis XIV's initiatives. The standardized placement of these lanterns facilitated a more organized urban environment beyond mere illumination. Ensuring consistent lighting required a dedicated workforce responsible for refilling reservoirs and tending to potential malfunctions. Contemporary accounts suggest that while the overall effect was transformative, localized variations in brightness remained common due to inconsistent upkeep or fluctuations in fuel quality. A Parisian writer in 1703 noted some areas were remarkably well lit, while others suffered from periods of dimness or complete darkness. This underscored the limitations inherent in relying on manual labor and readily available resources for public services. The design of the lanterns themselves continued to evolve as artisans sought ways to maximize light output and minimize fuel consumption. By 1745, a reverbère was introduced, a more efficient oil lantern that reportedly produced a considerably brighter illumination than its predecessors. This innovation prompted complaints regarding glare, suggesting an ongoing tension between enhanced visibility and potential discomfort for pedestrians and residents alike. The increased brightness of the reverbères also necessitated adjustments to their placement within the urban landscape, as previously adequate spacing proved insufficient to prevent visual disruption. The transition from oil-based systems represented a significant shift toward greater efficiency and consistency, though it was not without challenges. Contemporary accounts suggest that while the overall effect was transformative, localized variations in brightness persisted due to inconsistent upkeep or fluctuations in fuel quality. By 1857, Parisian writer Théophile Gautier noted the striking impact of these new lights on the city's atmosphere, describing them as shining with a clarity white and pure. This observation highlights not only the enhanced visibility, but also its aesthetic effect on the urban environment. The adoption of gas lamps in Paris served as an example for other European cities, eager to modernize their infrastructure and enhance public safety, though the process was gradual, reflecting varying levels of investment and technical expertise across different municipalities. The shift toward gas lighting spurred a rethinking of how lamps were constructed and positioned. Early oil lanterns, while an improvement over candles or torches, suffered from inefficiencies related to light dispersal and structural integrity. The introduction of glass panes around the late 16th century marked a significant turning point. Prior designs relied on open flames, which resulted in considerable loss of light due to scattering and drafts. Enclosing the flame within a lantern fitted with glass allowed for greater concentration of the emitted light, increasing its intensity and reach. Edmund Hemming, working in London, contributed to this development by improving the design and construction of these enclosed lanterns. Simultaneously, Jan van der Heyden in Amsterdam pursued similar advancements. These improvements represented a tangible increase in illumination for urban spaces. Alongside glass panes, attention turned to refining how lamps were suspended. Early installations often used simple ropes or chains, which proved vulnerable to wind and vandalism. More robust suspension systems emerged, utilizing stronger materials and more secure mounting points, ensuring the lanterns remained stable and functional despite environmental challenges. These advancements collectively contributed to a more reliable and effective system of street lighting. Van der Heyden meticulously documented his improvements in Nieuwe Lichtende Amsterdam, New Lighting Amsterdam, published in 1669. This work detailed the design of his lanterns and outlined a system for their placement and maintenance within the city. His designs incorporated features intended to minimize drafts and maximize light output, demonstrating an understanding of how to optimize lantern performance within a practical context. The publication served as both a practical guide for Amsterdam's authorities and a testament to van der Heyden's contributions. Hemming's work in London contributed to a gradual standardization of lantern design within the city. While specific details regarding his construction methods remain scarce, contemporary accounts suggest that he prioritized durability and ease of maintenance alongside improved illumination. The adoption of these designs was not immediate or universal. Budgetary constraints and resistance to change often slowed their implementation. However, the demonstrable benefits, increased visibility for nighttime commerce and reduced risk of crime, ultimately spurred wider acceptance. These advancements also fostered a culture of experimentation and refinement among other lantern makers and civic officials across Europe, leading to further incremental improvements in design and functionality throughout the late 17th century. The prioritization of durability reflected broader economic considerations. Lantern upkeep represented a significant municipal expense, and designs that minimized maintenance requirements were thus favored. Van der Heyden's design choices, the use of draft-reducing features, and careful consideration of light distribution demonstrated an evolving understanding of how to optimize lantern performance within a practical context. The gradual adoption across Europe highlights the interplay between technological advancement and civic priorities. Improvements in lantern design were not solely driven by scientific curiosity, but also by demonstrable benefits for public safety and commerce. Contemporary accounts suggest that increased visibility contributed to a perceived reduction in crime rates, further bolstering their acceptance among city officials and residents alike. The expansion of public lighting beyond London and Paris during the 18th century was intrinsically linked to broader patterns of urbanization across Europe. As cities grew, particularly commercial hubs, the demand for reliable illumination intensified. The need extended beyond mere safety. Nighttime visibility facilitated trade, entertainment, and social activity, all contributing to economic vitality. While Van der Heyden's lanterns had demonstrated a practical approach to street lighting in Amsterdam, their adoption elsewhere reflected not just technological transfer, but also evolving civic priorities within burgeoning urban centers. The principles of Dutch lantern design found their way into other European cities, though implementation varied based on local conditions and resources. The core functionality, a robust enclosure protecting the light source and minimizing draft, remained consistent, but materials and scale adapted to available infrastructure and budgets. As populations swelled and commercial districts expanded, existing lighting systems often proved inadequate, prompting municipalities to invest in more extensive networks. This wasn't a uniform process. Some cities embraced public illumination readily, while others lagged behind due to financial constraints or skepticism about its effectiveness. The increasing importance of nighttime commerce spurred demand for brighter and more consistent light sources. While tallow candles and oil lamps remained common, their limitations, flickering flames, smoky emissions, and relatively low intensity became increasingly apparent in densely populated areas. The desire for improved visibility fueled experimentation with alternative fuels and lamp designs, though widespread adoption was often hampered by the cost of materials and maintenance. The gradual spread of public lighting, therefore, represents a complex interplay between technological innovation, economic pressures, and shifting social attitudes toward nighttime activity within European cities. The adoption of gas lighting followed a similar pattern. While Baltimore's early implementation demonstrated its potential, other cities proceeded with caution. New York and Philadelphia, already invested in oil lamp infrastructure, initially lagged behind, their existing systems presenting an inertia against rapid technological shifts. By mid-century, however, the superior brightness, reportedly 10 times that of oil lamps, and consequent reduction in operating costs proved compelling. The initial demonstration by Rembrandt Peale in Baltimore highlighted the visual impact of gaslight, and its subsequent adoption across several cities signaled a growing acceptance. Yet, even as networks expanded, challenges persisted. Observations regarding New York City's lighting revealed that even with increased illumination, gaps remained, creating unevenly lit spaces. This underscored the ongoing need for both technological refinement and strategic placement of light sources to achieve truly effective public illumination. The cost of constructing piped gas distribution systems also presented a significant barrier, particularly for smaller towns and cities lacking the financial resources or industrial base to support such infrastructure projects. Furthermore, concerns about safety, leaks in gas lines, and potential explosions contributed to hesitancy among some municipal authorities. Despite these obstacles, the advantages of gas lighting gradually outweighed the drawbacks, leading to its widespread adoption throughout Europe's urban centers during the 19th century. The adoption was not uniform. Cities varied in their pace and approach based on local conditions and financial considerations. While London continued to refine its own network, other urban centers like Paris and Vienna followed suit, albeit with differing timelines and infrastructural challenges. The initial investment required for constructing the necessary piping systems often prompted protracted debates within city councils, balancing perceived benefits against immediate costs. In Paris, for example, resistance from established candle makers and lamp suppliers contributed to a slower rollout compared to cities like Baltimore or Vienna. The uneven distribution of wealth also played a role. Wealthier districts were typically prioritized for early adoption, creating disparities in public safety and commercial activity across different neighborhoods. Reports indicated that while gaslight significantly enhanced visibility on main thoroughfares, many side streets remained poorly lit, highlighting the logistical complexities of expanding networks throughout densely populated areas. Furthermore, reliance on coal as a primary fuel source introduced concerns about air quality and potential environmental impacts, prompting some municipalities to explore alternative sources or implement regulations aimed at mitigating pollution. The technical expertise required for constructing and maintaining gas infrastructure was also limited, necessitating training programs and often relying on engineers from Britain who had experience with earlier implementations. The earliest illumination of American streets relied on oil lamps fueled by whale oil, harvested from both the Arctic and South Atlantic Oceans. These weren't simply placed, their installation was a deliberate act, often driven by concerns about public safety at night. In Boston, for example, over 300 lamps were imported from England in 1773, following a newspaper call for improved nighttime visibility to deter crime and protect citizens. The design of these early lamps also saw innovation. Philadelphia's Benjamin Franklin introduced improvements like woven wicks and replaceable glass panes, making them more efficient and cost-effective. By 1809, New York City utilized over 1,600 oil lamps, while Philadelphia followed closely with 1,100. However, the reliance on whale oil presented significant challenges. The supply was inherently limited by whaling expeditions' range and success. Fluctuations in catches directly impacted lamp availability and costs. Maintaining these lamps required constant attention, as lamplighters were responsible for igniting them each evening and ensuring they remained lit throughout the night, a labor-intensive process. Contemporary accounts suggest their effect was limited. They created pools of light separated by areas of shadow, requiring pedestrians to navigate from one illuminated spot to another. The cost of whale oil itself represented a substantial expense for municipalities, diverting funds that could have been used for other public services. These limitations would ultimately pave the way for alternative lighting technologies. The challenges extended beyond supply and cost. The properties of whale oil also presented difficulties. It produced a smoky flame, contributing to air pollution and soot accumulation on buildings and street surfaces, necessitating frequent cleaning and adding to operational expenses. The odor of burning whale oil was often described as unpleasant, impacting quality of life for nearby residents. While spermaceti oil, utilized in New York City from 1792, burned brighter than other varieties, it remained subject to the same supply constraints and cost fluctuations associated with whaling activities. This fostered a continuous search for more sustainable and economical alternatives. Early experimentation with gaslighting began around this time, though its adoption was initially slow due to the established infrastructure supporting oil lamps and skepticism surrounding the new technology's reliability. Baltimore became the first American city to embrace gas street lighting in 1817, following demonstrations showcasing its potential at the Peel Museum the previous year. The Gas Light Company of Baltimore received municipal authorization to construct the necessary piping network for distributing coal gas, marking a significant step toward transitioning away from oil-based illumination. New York and Philadelphia's existing investments in oil lamps initially hindered widespread adoption elsewhere. The initial enthusiasm for gas lighting was tempered by practical challenges and economic considerations. While brighter than oil lamps, early coal gas proved to be less consistent. Variations in fuel quality and manufacturing processes resulted in fluctuating light intensity across the network. This inconsistency led some residents to express dissatisfaction, particularly those accustomed to the more predictable glow of whale oil. Furthermore, early gas infrastructure was prone to leaks, posing a fire hazard and contributing to unpleasant odors within buildings connected to the distribution system. New York City's experimentation with gas lighting in the 1820s demonstrated these issues. Despite initial trials along Broadway, The technology's unreliability and perceived safety risks hindered its widespread adoption. Philadelphia similarly encountered difficulties maintaining consistent pressure and quality of gas supply, impacting public perception and slowing down replacement efforts. By 1835, while some areas benefited from gas illumination, a significant portion of street lamps remained oil-powered, reflecting the ongoing debate about the merits of this new technology. The shift from liquid fuels like whale oil to gas lighting represented a significant technological leap, though its arrival was far from immediate or universally welcomed. Prior to this transition, homes and streets were illuminated by substances such as olive oil, beeswax, fish oil, and increasingly through the early 19th century, whale oil. The widespread use of whale oil in European cities like London persisted well into that same period. However, accumulating gases produced during coal mining had long been recognized for their adverse effects. Miners described these gases as choke damp and fire damp, and accounts dating back 1,700 years reveal the use of natural gas for lighting and heating in Chinese homes, transported via bamboo pipes. The groundwork for harnessing this gas was laid by earlier experimentation. Stephen Hales, a British clergyman and scientist, distilled coal in 1726, extracting a flammable liquid and noting its properties. Decades later, these findings gained renewed attention as the chemical characteristics of gases became better understood. Sir James Lowther demonstrated the flammability of coal gas to members of the Royal Society in 1733, though this demonstration did not immediately lead to practical application. John Clayton, referring to coal gas as the spirit of coal, accidentally discovered its flammability and entertained acquaintances by demonstrating it. It was William Murdoch who first recognized the potential for widespread use. Working for Matthew Boulton and James Watt at the Soho Foundry in Birmingham, England, Murdoch experimented with various gases while overseeing tin mining operations in Cornwall during the early 1790s. He began by lighting his own home in Redruth in 1792, then illuminated the main building of the Soho Foundry in 1798. In 1802, he publicly demonstrated gas lighting outside the foundry, creating a spectacle that astonished onlookers. Murdoch's statement at the time suggested that the gas obtained by distillation from coal, peat, wood, and other inflammable substances burnt with great brilliancy might be employed as an economical substitute for lamps and candles. While this initial demonstration generated excitement, skepticism also arose regarding the safety and practicality of this new technology. Murdoch's statements regarding cost comparisons between gas lighting and traditional methods drew attention to the potential economic advantages of the new technology. By 1808, Murdoch presented a paper entitled "Account of the Application of Gas from Coal to Economical Purposes" to the Royal Society, detailing his successful application of coal gas to light the extensive establishment of Messrs. Phillips and Lear. For this work he was awarded Count Rumford's Gold Medal. The paper contained information on expenses associated with production and management. While Murdoch's demonstration at Soho Foundry had generated considerable excitement, widespread adoption faced practical hurdles and lingering concerns about safety. In 1809, an application to Parliament sought incorporation of a company to accelerate the process. However, the bill did not pass. A renewed effort in 1810 resulted in the establishment of the London and Westminster Gas, Light and Coke Company. Less than 2 years later, Westminster Bridge was illuminated by gas. The first place outside London to embrace gas lighting was Preston, Lancashire in 1816, facilitated by the Preston Gaslight Company and its innovative methods for producing brighter gas. By 1817, Baltimore became the first American city with gas street lamps, initially illuminating Market and Lemon Streets through the efforts of Peel's Gaslight Company. The rapid proliferation of gas lighting across Britain and beyond demonstrated a growing acceptance of this novel technology, though challenges in purification remained. Mr. D. Wilson of Dublin patented a method for purifying coal gas using ammoniacal gas, while Reuben Phillips of Exeter devised a process involving dry lime. The years preceding 1807 saw experimentation with gas lighting in private settings, but it was on Pall Mall that London first witnessed a public demonstration of its potential. On June 4th, Frederick Albert Windsor illuminated a section of this prominent thoroughfare using gas piped from a nearby source. This wasn't merely the installation of lamps, it was an event intended to impress and persuade. The novelty of artificial light emanating from fixed points along the street generated considerable attention. Accounts suggest a palpable sense of wonder among onlookers, accustomed as they were to the dim glow of oil lanterns or simply darkness after sunset. The demonstration on Pall Mall served as a crucial turning point in public perception. Prior to this moment, gaslighting existed largely within the realm of scientific curiosity and industrial application. While William Murdoch had previously lit his own home and Soho foundry with gas, these were private endeavours. The visibility of gas lamps illuminating a well-known London street brought the technology into the everyday consciousness of citizens. This public display helped overcome skepticism regarding its safety and practicality, though some undoubtedly questioned the reliability or potential hazards of piped gas. The spectacle itself fostered an atmosphere of optimism about the possibilities it presented for urban life. Following this successful demonstration, interest in gaslighting quickly spread. The initial response wasn't immediate adoption across London, rather it was a period of careful evaluation and incremental implementation. Other areas within the city began to explore the feasibility of similar systems, with engineers and investors assessing the costs and logistical challenges involved. Westminster Bridge received gas lighting less than 2 years later, demonstrating an accelerated pace of adoption following the Pall Mall demonstration. The formation of the London and Westminster Gaslight and Coke Company in 1812 further spurred this expansion, establishing a formal structure for managing infrastructure and distribution. Initially, installations were concentrated within affluent neighborhoods and commercial districts. Early adopters included businesses seeking to illuminate factories and workshops, recognizing the benefits of extended working hours and improved safety. The novelty of gas lighting also attracted attention from private residences, although widespread domestic adoption would take considerably longer due to cost considerations and logistical challenges associated with piping gas into individual homes. The initial infrastructure proved costly to implement, requiring extensive networks of pipes and regulators to distribute the gas generated at centralized production facilities. This limited the immediate reach of gas lighting. The company's charter included provisions intended to ensure a degree of public accountability, stipulating that the price charged for gas could be reviewed by Parliament. However, early pricing structures proved controversial, with concerns raised about affordability for lower-income residents and businesses. The cost per foot of pipe and lamp installation contributed significantly to these high prices. Furthermore, producing coal gas itself was complex and required skilled labor, adding to operational expenses passed on to consumers. Despite these economic hurdles, the benefits of improved visibility and safety quickly became apparent, leading to a gradual expansion of the gas network beyond its initial core areas. Reports began circulating detailing reduced crime rates in illuminated districts, further bolstering public support for the technology's continued implementation. The early decades of the 19th century witnessed a quiet revolution unfolding within Paris, a shift from the familiar glow of oil to the nascent promise of gas lighting. While experimentation with flammable gases had occurred earlier, it was the burgeoning culture of spectacle that first provided fertile ground for this new technology's public demonstration. Prior to this moment, Parisian streets relied on lanterns suspended along cords, providing illumination that, while an improvement over complete darkness, remained dim and often unreliable. The Passage des Panoramas, a newly constructed covered shopping street opened in 1817, became the unlikely stage for this pivotal shift. The Passage des Panoramas itself was designed to capitalize on the popularity of panoramic displays, large circular paintings offering immersive views of distant landscapes. These attractions were immensely popular, and the Passage aimed to create an environment that would enhance their appeal through a controlled and aesthetically pleasing setting. It was within this context that gaslighting found its initial Parisian application. The decision to illuminate the Passage des Panoramas wasn't driven by any immediate need for improved street safety or public convenience. Rather, it served as a demonstration project intended to showcase the potential of gas as an alternative to oil lamps. The installation was a private undertaking, not a municipal initiative, reflecting the cautious and experimental nature of this early adoption. The precise details surrounding who organized and funded this initial lighting remain somewhat unclear within available sources. However, its success, or at least its novelty, quickly generated considerable interest among Parisians accustomed to the flickering light of oil-burning lanterns. While reports indicate that earlier demonstrations of gas lighting had occurred in private residences 17 years prior, the Passage des Panoramas marked a significant departure. It was the first instance of public street lighting utilizing this technology within Paris. The effect must have been striking, a consistent, brighter illumination emanating from fixtures unlike anything previously seen on Parisian streets. The novelty of gas lighting quickly extended beyond the Passage des Panoramas itself. Accounts suggest that Parisians frequently visited the passage simply to observe the illuminated interior, creating a spectacle that fueled further interest and demand for this new technology. While the initial installation was privately funded, its success spurred conversations about broader applications within the city. The precise individuals or organizations responsible for financing the Passage des Panoramas project remain elusive in available documentation. However, it is clear that they recognize the potential of gaslighting to attract clientele and enhance the passage's appeal. Reports indicate a gradual increase in requests from other businesses and public spaces seeking similar illumination. This nascent demand, coupled with the demonstrable novelty of the technology, encouraged further experimentation and refinement of gas lighting systems within Paris. The initial fixtures themselves were relatively simple, likely consisting of burners encased within glass globes to protect them from the elements. But their impact on the visual landscape was undeniable. Contemporary descriptions emphasize a brighter, more consistent light compared to the flickering glow of traditional oil lamps, contributing significantly to an atmosphere of modernity and sophistication within the Passage des Panoramas. The adoption of gas lighting in this setting represented not merely a technological advancement, but also a symbolic shift toward embracing new forms of urban spectacle and commercial innovation. The initial experiments with gas lighting quickly moved beyond laboratory demonstrations and private residences. The potential for illuminating public spaces, particularly urban areas, became apparent, spurring efforts to develop systems capable of distributing gas on a larger scale. One early example emerged in 1811 at the Dolphin Holme Gasworks in North Lancashire. Engineer Samuel Clegg designed and built this facility to serve the local worsted mill, saving its owners considerable expense, up to 1,500 candles nightly, by providing illumination for both the building itself and the surrounding street where workers resided. This demonstrated a practical application beyond mere novelty. Delivering gas to urban centers presented significant challenges. It required not only generating the gas, but also constructing an extensive network of pipes, regulators, and meters to ensure consistent pressure and distribution. The London and Westminster Gas, Light and Coke Company received a parliamentary charter in 1812, marking the formal establishment of what is considered the world's first gas company. Less than 2 years later, Westminster Bridge was illuminated using this system, showcasing its feasibility on a larger scale. This success spurred rapid expansion within Britain and abroad. Preston, Lancashire, followed suit in 1816 with Joseph Dunn's Gaslight Company introducing brighter illumination, while Baltimore became an early adopter across the Atlantic. In Paris, public street lighting wasn't introduced until 1817 in the Passage des Panoramas. The installation of gas lamps on main Parisian streets began in 1829, and by 1857 the Grands Boulevards were fully lit. This transformation dramatically altered the city's nighttime appearance and contributed to its growing reputation as a center of modernity. The expansion of these networks frequently necessitated tunneling beneath streets and buildings, a complex undertaking requiring skilled labor and careful planning to minimize disruption. In Paris, for example, the installation of gas lines often involved excavating deep trenches in densely populated areas, a process that was both time-consuming and expensive. Maintaining consistent pressure within the pipe network also proved challenging, particularly as demand increased and distances from the gasworks lengthened. Regulators were developed to manage these fluctuations, ensuring a stable supply to individual lamps. The design of the burners themselves also underwent refinement. Initially simple fixtures, they evolved to incorporate features that improved efficiency and light distribution. Concerns arose regarding the safety of gas lines, prompting investigations into potential leaks and explosions. While catastrophic failures were rare, localized incidents did occur, contributing to ongoing efforts to improve construction techniques and materials. The expansion of these networks also created new employment opportunities, from gas producers and pipe layers to lamplighters who manually ignited each lamp at dusk and extinguished them at dawn. The increasing complexity of gas production and distribution spurred the development of specialized engineering disciplines as engineers grappled with issues such as pipeline design, pressure regulation, and safety protocols. Gas companies often sought charters from local governments, granting them monopolies in exchange for providing lighting services, which could sometimes lead to disputes over pricing and service quality. Early detection relied heavily on visual observation by lamplighters and residents who would report unusual smells or hissing sounds. More sophisticated techniques involved using soapy solutions to identify bubbles forming at points of leakage along pipes and fittings. The construction of these networks disrupted established patterns of life and commerce, leading to temporary inconveniences and occasional conflicts with property owners. In some instances, landowners resisted the intrusion of gas lines beneath their estates. The byproducts of coal gas production, including tar and ammonia, posed environmental challenges, leading to experimentation with different purification methods and waste disposal strategies. For centuries, towns and cities became patchwork of shadow once the sun went down. This changed gradually with the spread of public nighttime lighting, which quietly reshaped work, safety, and social life. By the 17th and 18th centuries, some European cities were installing coordinated systems of street lamps. These were often oil lamps mounted on walls or posts at regular intervals. The expense required many cities to introduce special taxes to pay for what was becoming a public service. Maintenance proved labor-intensive. Lamplighters and cleaners worked every evening and morning, trimming wicks, lighting each lamp by hand, and then extinguishing them again. This created new kinds of urban work and became a visible symbol of municipal organization. The arrival of gaslight in the early 19th century marked a significant shift. Instead of individual oil lamps, gas flowed through networks of underground pipes to lamps that burned brighter and more evenly. Entire districts could be illuminated with fewer workers and more impressive results. The glow was stronger than most oil lamps, making theaters, boulevards, and shop windows vivid evening attractions. Night began to feel like an extension of daytime city life rather than a separate, shadowy world. This new technology quickly spread across the continent. Berlin, Vienna, and Budapest were among the cities that embraced gaslighting during the 1830s, driven by desires for increased safety, economic activity, and social control. The ability to extend business hours encouraged factories to run later, increasing economic output, but also sometimes worsening conditions for workers facing longer shifts in artificially lit spaces. The adoption of gas lighting in Berlin, Vienna, and Budapest followed similar patterns. Initial installations often focused on central business districts and areas frequented by the elite, reflecting both economic priorities and a desire to project an image of modernity. In Vienna, for example, the first gas lamps appeared along the Kärntnerstrasse, a major shopping street, demonstrating the technology's potential to stimulate commercial activity. Berlin's early installations similarly targeted theaters and government buildings. Budapest lagged slightly behind its Western counterparts, but by the 1830s, gaslight began illuminating key areas around the city center, though unevenly distributed across different districts. The cost of construction and maintenance remained a significant obstacle, requiring municipal authorities to carefully balance the benefits of improved lighting with the burden on taxpayers. Debates arose in each city regarding the equitable distribution of this new public service, as poorer neighborhoods often received less attention due to lower tax revenues or competing priorities. While proponents emphasized safety and economic gains, critics voiced concerns about increased surveillance and disruptions to established social rhythms, mirroring anxieties expressed earlier concerning oil lamps. The shift to gas lighting also altered the physical landscape of these cities. The installation of underground pipes required significant excavation and disruption, prompting complaints from residents and businesses along the planned routes. While proponents touted the improved illumination as a boon for commerce and public safety, concerns arose about the aesthetic impact of the new infrastructure. Some found the standardized appearance of gas lamps to be jarring compared to the more varied character of earlier oil-lit streets. The need for regular maintenance also created a new class of municipal workers, gasfitters and lamplighters, whose presence became an increasingly visible feature of urban life, performing their duties each evening and morning with methodical precision. The introduction of gas lighting marked a significant shift in how cities appeared and functioned at night. While earlier attempts to illuminate streets with oil lamps had been implemented, the arrival of gas offered a new level of brightness and efficiency. However, this technological advancement was not universally embraced. Public reaction was complex, encompassing both apprehension and eventual acceptance. Initial responses often centered on concerns about the intensity of the light itself. Some residents found the glare disruptive or unpleasant, expressing discomfort with what they perceived as an unnatural brightness invading their homes and streets. These sentiments reflected a broader unease regarding alterations to established routines and sensory experiences. Beyond aesthetic objections, anxieties arose from the practical implications of gaslighting. The new lamps were noticeably brighter than their oil-burning predecessors, and this increased illumination prompted worries about its impact on sleep patterns and overall well-being. Moreover, the very infrastructure supporting gaslighting, the network of pipes laid beneath city streets, generated complaints during installation. Disruptions to daily life caused by excavation and construction understandably fostered resentment among residents and businesses alike. The standardized appearance of these new lamps also drew criticism. Many felt they lacked the character and charm of the more varied oil-lit streetscapes that had previously defined urban environments. This sense of uniformity was seen as a loss of local distinctiveness, an unwelcome homogenization of the city's visual identity. The initial brightness of gas lamps also prompted concerns about their impact on public order. Some observers suggested that the increased illumination encouraged nocturnal activity, leading to a perceived rise in petty crime and disturbances. While authorities often asserted that lighting reduced criminal opportunities by increasing visibility, this claim was not universally accepted and remained subject to debate. Furthermore, the shift from oil to gas necessitated adjustments in municipal governance and financial structures. The creation of specialized gas companies introduced new economic actors into urban affairs, altering traditional patterns of public service provision. These entities held charters granting them exclusive rights to supply gas within designated areas, a system that occasionally generated friction with city governments accustomed to greater control over essential services. Residents also voiced anxieties regarding the safety of the underground pipe networks, fearing potential leaks or explosions, risks inherent in any nascent infrastructure project. The novelty of distributing combustible gases through subterranean conduits understandably fostered apprehension among those unfamiliar with this technology and its associated hazards. The intensity of gaslight also prompted complaints about its glare, with some residents finding it disorienting or uncomfortable. Adjustments to lamp design and placement were therefore undertaken in an attempt to mitigate these effects, though achieving a balance between adequate illumination and reduced brightness proved challenging. The novelty of the technology meant that experimentation was ongoing, and opinions on optimal lighting levels varied considerably across different communities and social groups. While some welcomed the increased visibility as a boon for safety and commerce, others continued to express reservations about its impact on nocturnal tranquility and perceived natural order. Observations regarding the effects of gaslight on public health also began to surface, although these remained largely speculative and lacked systematic investigation. Some observers suggested that the constant illumination might disrupt sleep patterns or contribute to eye strain, while others posited potential links between gas emissions and respiratory ailments, concerns reflective of broader anxieties about industrialization's impact on urban well-being. The late 18th century marked a shift in European urban landscapes, particularly in Paris, with increasing adoption of public street lighting. Prior to this, illumination relied on natural light or flickering oil lamps, often supplemented by link buoys guiding travelers through dark streets. The French Revolution, beginning in 1789, intersected with these nascent systems of public lighting in a unique and unsettling way. While intended to improve visibility and security, lampposts became tragically repurposed during this tumultuous era. Revolutionary fervor led to instances where these structures were utilized for executions and displays meant to intimidate perceived enemies of the new republic. Parisian streetlights already numbered over 2,000 by 1730 and steadily increased throughout the century, providing a readily available means of public spectacle. The elevated nature of lampposts allowed visibility across large areas, ensuring events could be witnessed by many. This use underscored a stark contrast between ideals of progress associated with urban improvement and the brutal realities of political upheaval. While intended to illuminate streets and deter crime, they became symbols of fear and retribution during this period. Accounts suggest revolutionaries found these fixtures a convenient place to hang aristocrats and other opponents. These displays were carefully orchestrated performances intended to intimidate counter-revolutionaries and solidify support for the new regime. The elevated position ensured visibility across large areas, allowing substantial crowds to witness proceedings. While specific details regarding frequency or precise locations remain scarce in available sources, their symbolic impact was undeniable. Lampposts designed to illuminate streets cast a grim light upon revolutionary justice, creating an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty amongst those perceived as threats to the Republic. These repurposed lampposts served as visual reminders of the revolution's power and its willingness to employ extreme measures. Beyond execution sites, lampposts became focal points for disseminating political messages through posters and proclamations, transforming them into public notice boards for the new regime. Accounts suggest these displays were often accompanied by speeches intended to justify revolutionary actions and rally support. The precise nature and frequency of such events remain difficult to ascertain due to limitations in surviving documentation. However, it is evident that lampposts played a significant role in shaping public perception during this period. The very structures designed to illuminate Parisian streets became inextricably linked with revolutionary justice, contributing to an atmosphere of pervasive anxiety among those perceived as enemies of the Republic. The visual impact served as a constant reminder of the revolution's power and its willingness to employ extreme measures in pursuit of its objectives. Prior to incandescent lamps, these lanterns were lit by individuals touring the town at dusk. King Louis XIV authorized reforms in Paris that included installation and maintenance of lights on streets, with penalties for vandalism. By 1730, Paris had twice as many streetlights. A diarist wrote in 1712 describing London's illuminated roads. In 1745, a brighter reverbère was introduced. Some complained of glare from the increased light. Prior to this time, illumination relied on oil lamps and candles, a system requiring constant tending by individuals touring the town at dusk. The mid-19th century witnessed a significant shift with Ignacy Łukacziewicz's invention of the kerosene lamp in 1853 within the city of Lemberg, then part of the Austrian Empire. This innovation presented a direct challenge to the established system of coal-gas lighting that had begun its spread across Europe earlier in the century. The use of flammable gas derived from coal had been demonstrated previously. John Clayton discovered its flammability accidentally in 1735, and William Murdoch first used it for lighting his own home in Cornwall in 1792. Public demonstrations followed, with gas illuminating buildings in England and later spreading to the United States by 1816. By 1813, London's Westminster Bridge was lit by gas, a spectacle that quickly gained popularity. Improved lanterns enhanced this technology, though concerns about glare occasionally arose. Gas lighting became commonplace across Europe and North America throughout the 19th century, with Paris adopting it in 1829, its boulevards eventually earning the city the nickname the City of Light. Łukasiewicz's kerosene lamp offered a compelling alternative. Kerosene, derived from petroleum, provided a longer-lasting fuel source than coal gas, which required extensive infrastructure for production and distribution. While Łukasiewicz's invention initially found use in Bucharest and Paris, it represented the beginning of competition between these two lighting methods. He subsequently established the world's first mine and kerosene refinery in Jasło, Poland, signaling a growing industry centered around petroleum-based illumination. The initial reception was mixed, as it faced established competition from coal gas lighting. Kerosene lamps required individual installation and maintenance. Unlike the centralized distribution system of gas networks, early refining processes yielded an inconsistent product. Some batches produced a smoky flame that diminished the lamp's appeal compared to the brighter light of gas. Despite these challenges, Lukasiewicz continued to refine both his lamp design and the petroleum extraction process. By 1856, he had established the first kerosene refinery in Jasło, Poland, marking a significant step toward industrial-scale production. Reports suggest that kerosene lamps began appearing in Bucharest by 1853, shortly after their invention, and were subsequently introduced to Paris, where they competed directly with existing gas infrastructure. Though adoption remained limited compared to established gas networks, Lukasiewicz's innovation initiated a period of technological competition. The initial cost of refining also presented a barrier. Early refineries were expensive, limiting production capacity and keeping prices relatively high. However, as demand grew and improvements streamlined the extraction process, costs gradually decreased. Reports from Paris indicated that while gas remained dominant in densely populated areas with established infrastructure, kerosene lamps found favor in newer districts and residential neighborhoods where installing a gas line was impractical or uneconomical. The lower maintenance requirements of individual kerosene lamps also appealed to property owners who wished to avoid the fees associated with gas service. By the late 1850s, several European cities began experimenting with kerosene street lighting on a limited scale, often in areas not yet served by gas networks. These trials provided data on lamp performance and public perception, contributing to further refinements in both design and fuel quality. The shift away from oil lamps wasn't sudden. It was a gradual process driven by both economic and technological factors. Gas lighting initially offered an advantage with brighter illumination, reported to be up to 10 times greater than oil lamps, though early observers noted a distinctly yellow light that appeared not very bright by modern standards. While New York and Philadelphia hesitated due to established infrastructure, cities like Baltimore quickly embraced gas street lighting, beginning in 1817. The economic appeal of gas lay partly in its potential for wider distribution, through piped networks connected to manufacturing plants, allowing service to neighborhoods where individual kerosene lamps would have been impractical. However, the initial investment was substantial, explaining why cities with existing oil systems were slower to adopt it. By 1835, even as gas lighting became prevalent in major urban centers, its presence remained uneven. New York City still relied on over 5,000 oil lamps alongside only 384 gas lights. The cost of maintaining these networks also factored into the equation, with property owners often facing associated fees. Many cities erected only 1 or 2 towers before reverting to traditional lamppost lighting. Los Angeles was an exception, erecting 36 towers, 15 reaching 150 feet tall and equipped with 6 to 8 arc lamps each. By 1893, the city had decommissioned all but 3 of these structures. While gas lighting initially offered a significant advantage in brightness, its own limitations became apparent. The yellow hue was considered undesirable by some, and maintaining the piped networks proved challenging. Reliance on coal gas also meant vulnerability to fuel supply fluctuations. As a result, while dominant throughout much of the 19th century, it faced increasing competition from newer technologies, particularly as electric lighting began to emerge. Initial investment for gas infrastructure presented a barrier in smaller towns, often leading them to stick with oil lamps or transition directly to alternatives later on. In Chicago, early experiments involved gas retorts, initially used at breweries and distilleries, before adaptation for street illumination, resulting in an unevenly lit cityscape. Transporting coal gas over long distances posed challenges, including leaks and wasted resources. The production of coal gas also generated significant byproducts requiring safe disposal, adding to operational costs. The first public demonstration of outdoor electrical lighting in the U.S. occurred in Cleveland, Ohio in 1879, using a dynamo arc light producing an equivalent glow to 4,000 candles. Wabash, Indiana, became the first town in the world generally lighted by electricity on March 31, 1880. By 1893, New York City had 26,500 gas streetlights and only 1,500 electrical lights. During the early 20th century, competition among lighting providers included carbon arc lamps, incandescent lamps, coal gas lamps, gasoline, and naphtha lamps. Incandescent lamps, initially developed for indoor use, were perfected with tungsten filaments by 1911, becoming increasingly popular for public street lighting. By 1917, nearly 1.4 million incandescent filament lamps were in use across the United States. The mid-20th century saw increased motorization and a need for better illumination, leading to the adoption of mercury vapor lamps starting in 1950 due to their cost efficiency. Sodium vapor lamps emerged later, initially recommended for safety lighting in tunnels and on bridges. By 1973, high-pressure sodium vapor lamps became increasingly common, driven by energy concerns and promoted as tools for crime surveillance. Efforts toward greater energy efficiency led to the adoption of light-emitting diodes, LEDs, starting in 2007, offering whiter light and potential for centralized control systems. Ann Arbor, Michigan, began converting its streetlights to LEDs, expecting reduced electricity and maintenance costs. The shift reflects a continuing evolution in how cities illuminate their streets. For centuries, once the sun went down, towns and cities became patchworks of shadow. People carried candles, oil lamps, or torches, and many simply stayed home. Traveling after dark was risky because of uneven streets, animals, thieves, and the basic problem of not seeing where you were going. Authorities sometimes imposed curfews, not only for security, but because patrolling in darkness was difficult. The idea that the whole city should be lit at night took a long time to appear. Early attempts to light the night involved ordering residents to hang lanterns outside their houses on certain nights or during winter. These measures were patchy, showing how communities slowly saw lighting as a shared responsibility. As commerce grew and cities became busier, pressure increased to make nights more usable. Inns, markets, and busy crossroads were the first places where permanent lights appeared, usually oil lamps that required constant tending, refilling, and cleaning. By the 17th and 18th centuries, some European cities began installing coordinated systems of street lamps. Oil lamps, often fueled by whale oil or vegetable oils, were mounted on walls or posts at regular intervals. This was expensive. So many cities introduced special taxes to pay for what was becoming a public service. Maintenance was labor-intensive. Lamp lighters and cleaners worked every evening and morning, trimming wicks, lighting each lamp by hand, and then putting them out again. Even imperfect lighting made a dramatic difference. Streets became safer to navigate, and some people felt more confident going out in the evening. Shops and workshops could stay open later, and inns and coffee houses attracted customers after dark. Not everyone welcomed this change. Some residents disliked paying new taxes, while others felt that bright nights disturbed natural rhythms or encouraged noisy nightlife. Debates around lighting were early versions of modern discussions about 24-hour cities and light pollution. Authorities quickly noticed that lit streets were easier to police. Criminals had fewer places to hide, and patrols could see further. In the early 19th century, gaslighting arrived. Instead of individual oil lamps, gas flowed through networks of underground pipes to lamps that burned brighter and more evenly. Entire districts could be illuminated with fewer workers and more impressive results. The shift to gas lighting also altered working patterns for those responsible for maintaining illumination. Previously, lamplighters had moved from one oil lamp to another, a task requiring considerable physical effort and time. With gaslight, fewer individuals were needed to manage entire districts, although new roles emerged in the construction and upkeep of the underground pipe networks that distributed the gas. Some workers found their old jobs obsolete, while others sought employment, maintaining the increasingly complex infrastructure. The brighter light also encouraged experimentation with different architectural styles. Buildings could be ornamented with details previously lost in shadow, and grand facades became more visible at night, contributing to a sense of urban spectacle. While gaslight offered advantages, it was not without drawbacks. Gas flames produced soot that accumulated on buildings and within homes, requiring frequent cleaning. Leaks in pipes or faulty fittings posed risks of explosion, though these incidents were relatively rare. Furthermore, the smell of gas was often unpleasant, particularly in poorly ventilated areas. The transition to gas lighting did not occur uniformly across cities. Wealthier districts adopted it more quickly than poorer ones, exacerbating existing social inequalities in access to improved services and safety. For centuries, towns and cities became patchwork shadows after sunset. People carried candles or torches, and many simply stayed home. Authorities sometimes imposed curfews, partly because patrolling in darkness was difficult. The idea that an entire city should be lit at night took a long time to appear. Early attempts involved ordering residents to hang lanterns outside their homes on certain nights, a patchy measure demonstrating a slow recognition of lighting as a shared responsibility. As commerce grew and cities became busier, pressure increased to make nights more usable. Inns, markets, and busy crossroads were the first places where permanent lights appeared, usually oil lamps, that required constant tending, refilling, and cleaning. By the 17th and 18th centuries, some European cities began installing coordinated systems of street lamps. Oil lamps, often fueled by whale oil or vegetable oils, were mounted on walls or posts at regular intervals. This was expensive. So many cities introduced special taxes to pay for what was becoming a public service. Maintenance required lamplighters and cleaners working every evening and morning, trimming wicks, lighting each lamp by hand, and then extinguishing them again. Even imperfect lighting made a dramatic difference. Streets became safer, and some people felt more confident going out in the evening. Shops and workshops could stay open later, attracting customers after dark. However, not everyone welcomed this change. Some residents disliked paying new taxes or felt that bright nights disturbed natural rhythms. The introduction of these early lighting systems did not occur without consequence. The oil used to fuel lamps, whether whale oil or vegetable oils, represented a drain on resources and generated fumes that contributed to urban air pollution. Whale oil, in particular, spurred destructive hunting practices with significant ecological impacts on marine mammal populations. While the immediate effects were localized, a grimy film on buildings, acrid smells in the streets, the long-term environmental costs began to accumulate. Some observers noted a decline in air quality and an increase in respiratory ailments among those living near heavily lit areas. These concerns remained largely unquantified, but contributed to a growing unease about the trade-offs inherent in expanding nighttime activity. The reliance on animal products also created price volatility. Shortages of whale oil, for example, could lead to higher lighting costs or even temporary blackouts. As cities grew and demand increased, alternative oils were sought, sometimes with questionable results, as cheaper options often produced more noxious fumes. The shift toward alternative oils often carried its own set of environmental problems. Some vegetable oils, while seemingly less reliant on animal products, required extensive land cultivation, potentially leading to deforestation and habitat loss. Furthermore, the processing of these oils could generate waste streams that polluted waterways. The search for cheaper fuels also spurred experimentation with less refined substances, which frequently released noxious compounds into the atmosphere, exacerbating respiratory problems in urban populations. While precise measurements were lacking, contemporary accounts detailed a pervasive sense of grime and unpleasant odors associated with illuminated areas, particularly during periods of poor ventilation or inclement weather. Observations regarding darkened buildings and sooty surfaces became commonplace descriptions of cities adopting new lighting systems, suggesting widespread deposition of particulate matter from combustion processes. The cumulative effect of these localized pollution events contributed to a gradual degradation of the urban environment, though the full extent of ecological damage remained largely unquantified at the time. For centuries, towns and cities became patchwork shadows after sunset. People carried candles, oil lamps, or torches, and many simply stayed home. Traveling after dark was risky due to uneven streets, animals, thieves, and the basic problem of not seeing where one went. Authorities sometimes imposed curfews for security, and because patrolling in darkness proved difficult, the idea that an entire city should be illuminated at night took considerable time to emerge. Early attempts involved ordering residents to hang lanterns outside their houses on certain nights or during winter. These measures were inconsistent, but they demonstrated a slow recognition of lighting as a shared responsibility within communities. As commerce grew and cities became busier, pressure increased to make nights more usable. Inns, markets, and busy crossroads were the first places where permanent lights appeared, usually oil lamps that required constant tending, refilling, and cleaning. By the 17th and 18th centuries, some European cities began installing coordinated systems of street lamps. Oil lamps, often fueled by whale oil or vegetable oils, were mounted on walls or posts at regular intervals. This was expensive. So many cities introduced special taxes to pay for what was becoming a public service. Maintenance was labor-intensive. Lamp lighters and cleaners worked every evening and morning, trimming wicks, lighting each lamp by hand, and then extinguishing them again. The job created new kinds of urban work and became a visible symbol of municipal organization. Even imperfect lighting made a dramatic difference. Streets became safer to navigate, and some people felt more confident going out in the evening. Shops and workshops could stay open later, and inns and coffee houses attracted customers after dark. The introduction of gas lighting marked a significant shift. While oil lamps had offered only localized illumination, gaslight allowed for brighter and more extensive networks. Early adopters included theaters and shopfronts, transforming how businesses presented themselves after dark. The Science Museum notes that by the late 18th century, gas provided relatively gentle illumination, but it represented an advance over earlier methods. However, domestic use was not without drawbacks. Fumes, smoke, and the risk of explosions limited its appeal in some quarters. More powerful electric arc lamps soon followed, initially used for public spaces due to their intensity. These early electric lights were so bright that they could illuminate entire blocks, as occurred in New York City during the 1860s. Robert Louis Stevenson expressed reservations about this new brightness, contrasting it unfavorably with the gentler glow of gaslight. The transition from gas to electricity was not immediate or universally welcomed. Some residents preferred the familiar flame and perceived the electric light's glare as disruptive. Still, the increased visibility brought by these innovations altered urban life, enabling extended business hours and a more vibrant nightlife. The transition to electric lighting also prompted a reconsideration of urban aesthetics. The Science Museum notes that while gaslight had cast a warm, yellowish glow, early electric arc lamps produced a starker, whiter light. This altered perceptions of color and architectural detail, influencing design choices for both public buildings and private residences. While some initially found the brightness jarring, others embraced it as a symbol of modernity and progress. The increased illumination also facilitated new forms of nighttime entertainment, such as outdoor concerts and theatrical performances, further contributing to the city's vibrancy. However, the intensity of early electric lights did present challenges. Glare was a frequent complaint, and shielding lamps became necessary to mitigate its effects on pedestrians and nearby residents. For centuries, once the sun went down, towns and cities became patchworks of shadow. People carried candles, oil lamps, or torches, and many simply stayed home. Authorities sometimes imposed curfews, not only for security, but because patrolling in darkness was difficult. The idea that the whole city should be lit at night took a long time to appear. Early attempts at illuminating streets involved simple rules. Residents were ordered to hang lanterns outside their houses on certain nights or during winter. These measures were patchy, showing how communities slowly began to see lighting as a shared responsibility. As commerce grew and cities became busier, pressure increased to make nights more usable. Inns, markets, and busy crossroads were the first places where permanent lights appeared, usually oil lamps that required constant tending, refilling, and cleaning. By the 17th and 18th centuries, some European cities began installing coordinated systems of street lamps. These oil lamps, often fueled by whale oil or vegetable oils, were mounted on walls or posts at regular intervals. This was an expensive undertaking. So many cities introduced special taxes to pay for what was becoming a public service. The job created new kinds of urban work and a visible symbol of municipal organization. Lamplighters and cleaners worked every evening and morning, trimming wicks, lighting each lamp by hand, and then putting them out again. The introduction of these coordinated systems also prompted debate. Some residents disliked paying new taxes to support them, while others felt that bright nights disturbed natural rhythms or encouraged noisy nightlife. Discussions around lighting represented early versions of modern debates about 24-hour cities and light pollution. Authorities quickly recognized the impact of illumination on public order. Lit streets provided greater visibility for patrols and reduced opportunities for crime, although historians continue to debate the extent of this effect. Lighting also facilitated surveillance, allowing authorities to monitor public spaces more closely and curb potential unrest. While residents may have appreciated safer streets, they simultaneously lived under increased scrutiny. The labor involved in maintaining these early lighting systems remained significant. Lamplighters and cleaners continued their routines each evening and morning, performing the essential tasks of wick trimming, ignition, and extinguishment. The introduction of coordinated lighting systems also required new forms of municipal oversight. Cities established officials responsible for lamp maintenance, fuel procurement, and collection of associated taxes. These roles evolved over time, sometimes falling under existing departments like public works or sanitation, while at other times requiring specialized bureaus dedicated solely to street illumination. The scale of these operations meant that contracts with private individuals or companies became common. Citizens might be hired to supply oil, repair lamps, or perform the nightly lighting and extinguishing duties. Records from London, for example, document agreements between city authorities and lamprights, who were responsible for constructing and maintaining a portion of the streetlights within designated districts. These arrangements often included stipulations regarding lamp quality, fuel consumption, and response times for repairs, reflecting an early attempt to regulate what was rapidly becoming a vital municipal service. The gradual spread of public nighttime lighting reshaped work, safety, and social life. For centuries, towns and cities became patchworks of shadow after sunset. People carried candles or torches, and many simply stayed home. As commerce grew and cities became busier, pressure increased to make nights more usable. This led to early attempts at illumination, with some communities ordering residents to hang lanterns outside their houses on certain nights. By the 17th and 18th centuries, European cities began installing coordinated systems of street lamps. These were often oil lamps fueled by whale or vegetable oils, mounted on walls or posts. The expense of these systems necessitated the introduction of special taxes to fund what was becoming a public service. Maintaining these lamps proved labor-intensive. Lamp lighters and cleaners worked every evening and morning, trimming wicks, lighting each lamp by hand, and then extinguishing them again. This created new kinds of urban work and became a visible symbol of municipal organization. The introduction of these coordinated lighting systems brought with it new financial burdens for both municipal governments and residents. Cities instituted special taxes to cover the costs, a measure that frequently generated public discontent. Some residents objected to paying for what they perceived as an unnecessary expense, particularly when budgets were already strained by other civic obligations. Others voiced concerns about the disruption of established routines and rhythms associated with natural darkness. These debates reflected broader anxieties regarding urban development and the balance between collective benefit and individual cost. The labor required to maintain these early lighting systems also represented a significant expenditure. While creating new employment opportunities for lamp lighters and cleaners, the ongoing need for their services placed a continuous demand on municipal resources. Authorities quickly recognized that illuminated streets facilitated policing efforts. Criminals found it more difficult to operate undetected, and patrols could extend their reach. Proponents of public lighting often emphasize this crime-reducing effect, although historians note that the actual impact varied considerably depending on local conditions and remained subject to ongoing investigation. The introduction of these coordinated lighting systems also prompted debate regarding their equitable distribution across different neighborhoods and social strata. Wealthier districts often received preferential treatment, boasting more frequent lamp placement and brighter illumination compared to poorer areas. This disparity fueled resentment among residents who felt marginalized by the uneven provision of what was increasingly presented as a fundamental civic amenity. The costs associated with maintaining these early lighting systems extended beyond the initial installation and ongoing labor. Fuel acquisition represented another significant expenditure. Cities relied on various sources, including whale oil, a commodity subject to fluctuating prices and geopolitical considerations, as well as vegetable oils derived from crops like rapeseed or olive pits. These supply chains were vulnerable to disruption, impacting the reliability of illumination and prompting authorities to seek alternative resources. Furthermore, the accumulation of soot and grime on lamp surfaces diminished their effectiveness, necessitating regular cleaning efforts that added further to the overall expense. For centuries, towns and cities became patchwork landscapes of shadow once the sun set. People carried candles or oil lamps, and many simply stayed home. Authorities sometimes imposed curfews, partly because patrolling in darkness was difficult. As commerce grew, pressure increased to make nights more usable. Inns, markets, and busy crossroads were among the first places where permanent lights appeared, usually oil lamps requiring constant tending. By the 17th and 18th centuries, some European cities began installing coordinated systems of street lamps. These oil lamps, fueled by resources like whale oil or vegetable oils, were mounted on walls or posts at regular intervals. The cost necessitated special taxes to pay for what was becoming a public service. Maintenance demanded labor. Lamplighters and cleaners worked every evening and morning, trimming wicks and lighting each lamp by hand before extinguishing them again. This created new kinds of urban work and became a visible symbol of municipal organization. Even imperfect lighting made a dramatic difference. Streets became safer to navigate, and some people felt more confident venturing out in the evening. The initial adoption of these oil lamps also prompted debate and resistance. As noted in a study of urban development, some residents voiced concerns about the cost of maintaining the lights, particularly those who felt they rarely benefited from them. Others worried that brighter nights would disrupt established routines or encourage undesirable behavior. The presence of lamplighters became commonplace. Their routes and schedules were as regular as any other trade, and their work contributed to a sense of order and predictability within the city. While improving safety was a primary goal, authorities also recognized the potential for increased surveillance. Well-lit streets facilitated patrols and made it more difficult for criminal activity to occur unnoticed. The visibility afforded by these early street lighting systems subtly altered the dynamics between citizens and those responsible for maintaining public order. The transition from individual oil lamps to coordinated systems was not uniform across Europe, nor did its impact manifest identically in every city. Some towns opted for simpler arrangements, with lights placed only at key intersections or along major thoroughfares. Others embraced more ambitious plans, attempting to illuminate entire neighborhoods. The design of the lanterns themselves varied considerably, reflecting local tastes and available resources. While some were simple metal cages protecting a lamp, others incorporated decorative elements, ornate carvings or colored glass, intended to enhance their aesthetic appeal. These details contributed to the unique character of each city's nighttime appearance. The decorative elements often incorporated local heraldry or civic symbols, reinforcing a sense of municipal pride and identity. In some cities, lanterns were painted to match building facades, creating a harmonious visual effect. The color of the glass used in the lamps also contributed to the overall aesthetic. Amber-tinted lenses softened the light and created a warmer glow, while colored glass was sometimes employed for purely ornamental purposes. This careful consideration of design reflected a growing awareness among urban planners and civic leaders that street lighting could be more than just functional. It could actively shape the character and atmosphere of a city's public spaces. The expense associated with these embellishments meant they were most common in wealthier areas, further contributing to disparities in the quality of urban experience across different neighborhoods. While gas lighting offered improvements over earlier oil-based systems, its implementation was not without challenges. The construction of underground piping networks proved complex and costly, requiring significant disruption to existing infrastructure. Furthermore, the flammability of gas presented a constant safety hazard, necessitating stringent regulations and careful maintenance to prevent accidents. For centuries, once the sun went down, towns and cities became patchworks of shadow. People carried candles, oil lamps, or torches, and many simply stayed home. Traveling after dark was risky because of uneven streets, animals, thieves, and the basic problem of not seeing where you were going. Authorities sometimes imposed curfews, not only for security, but because patrolling in darkness was difficult. The introduction of public nighttime lighting began to reshape urban life, though its benefits were rarely distributed evenly. Early attempts at illumination involved ordering residents to hang lanterns outside their homes on certain nights or during winter. These efforts were limited and inconsistent, reflecting a gradual shift in understanding the responsibility for city safety. As commerce grew and cities became busier, pressure increased to make nights more usable. Inns, markets, and busy crossroads were the first places where permanent lights appeared, usually oil lamps that required constant tending, refilling, and cleaning. The expense of these systems meant that wealthier districts often received better lighting than poorer ones. The creation of coordinated systems of street lamps, oil lamps mounted on walls or posts at regular intervals, required special taxes to pay for what was becoming a public service. Maintenance itself was labor-intensive. Lamplighters and cleaners worked every evening and morning, trimming wicks, lighting each lamp by hand, and then extinguishing them again. This created new kinds of urban work, but also served as a visible symbol of municipal organization, an organization that prioritized certain areas over others. The prioritization of wealthier districts was not merely a matter of aesthetics, it reflected broader patterns of urban governance and taxation. Areas with higher property values generated more revenue, allowing for greater investment in public amenities like street lighting. Conversely, poorer neighborhoods, often characterized by densely packed housing and lower tax yields, received less attention. This disparity reinforced existing social hierarchies, creating a visible distinction between those who benefited from the perceived advantages of urban life and those who did not. The uneven distribution of light also contributed to perceptions of safety. While well-lit areas appeared more secure, poorly lit districts remained vulnerable to crime and offered little respite from the challenges of poverty. This fostered resentment among residents in underserved communities, further exacerbating social tensions within the city. While some wealthier citizens might have expressed concerns about the cost of public lighting through new taxes, those living in less affluent areas often faced a double burden: limited access to essential services, coupled with contributing to the overall tax base that funded them. The uneven distribution of light also reflected underlying economic realities. Wealthier districts often possessed better infrastructure, including more robust systems for delivering fuel to lamps and maintaining them regularly. Conversely, poorer areas frequently suffered from inadequate maintenance, resulting in flickering or extinguished lights that offered little real benefit. This disparity extended beyond mere illumination. The presence or absence of consistent street lighting became another marker of social standing, reinforcing perceptions of privilege and marginalization within the urban landscape. While some municipal ordinances attempted to standardize lighting across all districts, enforcement often proved challenging due to limited resources and competing priorities. The very act of assigning lamplighters and cleaners demonstrated a prioritization that favored areas with greater visibility and perceived importance to city officials, further solidifying the divide between well-lit and poorly lit neighborhoods. The evolution of street lighting wasn't a sudden shift, but a gradual process built upon incremental improvements and individual ingenuity. Prior to widespread gas or electric illumination, maintaining even basic visibility after dark was a shared responsibility, often reliant on hired link boys who escorted individuals through dimly lit streets. The earliest forms of public lighting involved oil lamps, a technology dating back to ancient Greek and Roman civilizations, where they primarily served security functions. These early systems were inconsistent. Districts with better infrastructure benefited from more reliable fuel delivery and maintenance, while poorer areas often suffered from flickering or extinguished lights. A significant advancement came with the introduction of lanterns featuring glass windows, pioneered by Edmund Hemming in London and Jan van der Heyden in Amsterdam. This seemingly simple modification dramatically increased the amount of light produced compared to earlier designs. Simultaneously, King Louis XIV's reforms in Paris led to the installation of over 2,700 streetlights by the end of the 17th century, a considerable achievement that transformed the city's nighttime appearance and earned it early recognition as the City of Light. These lanterns were suspended along streets at a height of roughly 20 feet. However, the real revolution in urban illumination arrived with the application of coal gas. William Murdoch, while working in Cornwall's tin mining industry, experimented with flammable gases and first lit his own house using coal gas in 1792. He subsequently illuminated the Soho Foundry building and publicly demonstrated the technology, astonishing onlookers. In 1807, Frederick Albert Windsor introduced public gas lighting to Pall Mall in London, marking a pivotal moment. Samuel Clegg's design of what is now considered the world's oldest extant gasworks in Dolphinholme, Lancashire, further solidified this shift, saving mill owners considerable expense and illuminating both their business and workers' homes. The establishment of the London and Westminster Gas, Light and Coke Company in 1812 signalled a new era, with the Westminster Bridge becoming the first major structure lit by gas less than 2 years later. The establishment of the London and Westminster Gas, Light and Coke Company in 1812 signalled a new era, with the Westminster Bridge becoming the first major structure lit by gas less than 2 years later. Following this success, gas lighting spread outside London, both within Britain and abroad. The first place outside London in England to have gas lighting was Preston, Lancashire in 1816, where Joseph Dunn's Preston Gaslight Company introduced a new, brighter gas lighting. Another early adopter was the city of Baltimore, where the gas lights were first demonstrated at Rembrandt Peale's Museum in 1816, and Peale's Gas Light Company of Baltimore provided the first gas street lights in the United States. In 1875, Pavel Yablochkov developed an alternating current arc lamp which ensured equal electrode consumption. By 1878, electric streetlights were installed on the Avenue de l'Opéra and the Place de l'Étoile in Paris to celebrate the opening of the Paris Universal Exposition. Newcastle was the first city to have a street lit by incandescent light. Joseph Swan's lamp illuminated Mosley Street for one night on February 3, 1879. The system of gas lighting also included devices designed to maintain functionality when individual lamps failed. Early series streetlights were equipped with isolation transformers that allowed current to pass even if a bulb burned out. To prevent the entire circuit from failing, film cutouts were installed. These isolated contacts, which would penetrate an insulating film if a lamp failed, bypassing it and restoring power to the remaining lights. For centuries, towns and cities became patchwork shadows after sunset. People carried candles, oil lamps or torches, and many simply stayed home. Traveling after dark was risky because of uneven streets, animals, thieves, and the basic problem of not seeing where you were going. Authorities sometimes imposed curfews for security, but also because patrolling in darkness was difficult. The idea that an entire city should be lit at night took a long time to appear. Early attempts involved ordering residents to hang lanterns outside their houses on certain nights or during winter, showing how communities slowly saw lighting as a shared responsibility. As commerce grew and cities became busier, pressure increased to make nights more usable. Inns, markets, and busy crossroads were the first places where permanent lights appeared, usually oil lamps that required constant tending, refilling, and cleaning. By the 17th and 18th centuries, some European cities installed coordinated systems of street lamps. Oil lamps, often fueled by whale oil or vegetable oils, were mounted on walls or posts at regular intervals. This was expensive, so many cities introduced special taxes to pay for what was becoming a public service. Maintenance required constant labor. Lamplighters and cleaners worked every evening and morning, trimming wicks, lighting each lamp by hand, then putting them out again. Even imperfect lighting made a dramatic difference. Streets became safer, and some people felt more confident going out in the evening. Shops and workshops could stay open later, attracting customers after dark. In the early 19th century, gas lighting arrived. Instead of individual oil lamps, gas flowed through networks of underground pipes to lamps that burned brighter and more evenly. Entire districts could be illuminated with fewer workers and impressive results. Gaslight changed the character of the night. The glow was stronger than most oil lamps, so theaters, boulevards, and shop windows became vivid evening attractions. The shift to gas offered advantages beyond mere brightness. It also presented new challenges. Early gas lighting systems were often unreliable, with fluctuating light levels and occasional explosions, a risk that prompted some residents to resist their installation. The construction of underground pipe networks was disruptive, requiring extensive excavation in already crowded urban areas. Furthermore, the process of producing gas itself generated noxious fumes and required specialized facilities located near cities, adding to environmental concerns. While gaslight represented a significant improvement over oil lamps, its adoption was not universally welcomed. Some residents disliked paying new taxes dedicated to funding these systems, while others worried about the increased noise and activity that accompanied extended evening hours. The introduction of electric lighting in the late 19th century promised to resolve many of these issues. Electric arc lamps initially appeared as a novelty, powerful lights used for illuminating public spaces like harbors and grand boulevards. These early electric lights were intensely bright, sometimes described as producing an ugly, blinding glare, and too powerful for residential use. The development of the incandescent light bulb by inventors such as Joseph Swan and Thomas Edison offered a solution. A less intense, more controllable source of illumination suitable for homes and businesses. Early adopters found that electric lighting provided a brighter, cleaner alternative to gas, though it remained initially expensive and required access to electrical generating plants. As electricity distribution networks expanded, the convenience and relative safety of electric light gradually led to its widespread adoption, marking another step in reshaping how people experience the night. For centuries, darkness dictated the rhythms of urban life. Once the sun set, towns and cities became patchworks of shadow, limiting activity and shaping people's routines. Traveling after dark presented risks. Uneven streets, animals, thieves, and many simply remained at home. Authorities sometimes imposed curfews, partly because patrolling in darkness was difficult. The idea that an entire city should be illuminated at night took a long time to appear. Early attempts to combat this darkness were modest. From the late Middle Ages into the early modern period, some towns began experimenting with simple rules. Residents were ordered to hang lanterns outside their houses on certain nights or during winter. These measures were patchy, but they show how communities slowly saw lighting as a shared responsibility. As commerce grew and cities became busier, pressure increased to make nights more usable. Inns, markets, and busy crossroads were the first places where permanent lights appeared, typically oil lamps that required constant tending, refilling, and cleaning. By the 17th and 18th centuries, some European cities began installing coordinated systems of street lamps. Oil lamps, often fueled by whale oil or vegetable oils, were mounted on walls or posts at regular intervals. This was expensive. So many cities introduced special taxes to pay for what was becoming a public service. Maintaining these lights required significant labor. Lamplighters and cleaners worked every evening and morning, trimming wicks, lighting each lamp by hand, and then extinguishing them again. The job created new kinds of urban work and became a visible symbol of municipal organization. The introduction of coordinated street lighting also prompted debate within communities. While proponents emphasized the benefits to commerce and public safety, some residents expressed reservations about the new taxes required to fund these systems. Others voiced concerns that brighter nights would disrupt established rhythms of daily life or encourage undesirable nighttime activities. These disagreements reflected broader tensions between those who favored increased municipal control and those who valued traditional patterns of social order. Authorities quickly noticed that lit streets were easier to police. Criminals had fewer places to hide, and patrols could see further. Supporters argued that lighting reduced crime, although the actual impact varied from place to place. Lighting also allowed states to monitor public spaces more closely, contributing to curbing riots and clandestine meetings. Residents might enjoy safer streets, but they also lived under brighter eyes. The initial adoption of these systems frequently involved compromises. Some districts received lighting while others did not, based on factors such as population density or perceived economic importance. Residents in unlit areas sometimes petitioned for inclusion, highlighting disparities in safety and convenience. The uneven distribution of light created a visual landscape where brightly illuminated commercial zones contrasted sharply with the darker residential streets beyond, further emphasizing social divisions within urban spaces. These patterns of illumination subtly altered perceptions of neighborhood boundaries and contributed to evolving understandings of public versus private space. Even imperfect lighting made a dramatic difference. Streets became safer to navigate, and some people felt more confident going out in the evening. Shops and workshops could stay open later, and inns and coffee houses attracted customers after dark. And even imperfect lighting made a dramatic difference. Streets became safer to navigate, and some people felt more confident going out in the evening. Shops and workshops could stay open later, and inns and coffee houses attracted customers after dark. But this era of oil lamps was about to give way to something new. In the early 19th century, gaslighting arrived, fundamentally altering the character of urban nights. Instead of individual oil lamps tended by hand, gaslighting involved networks of underground pipes delivering gas to specially designed lamps. The effect was striking. Entire districts could be illuminated with fewer workers and more impressive results than had previously been possible. This new technology changed how people experienced night itself. The glow from gaslight was stronger and more even compared to the flickering light of oil, transforming theaters, boulevards, and shop windows into vivid evening attractions. Night began to feel like an extension of daytime city life rather than a separate, shadowy world. The shift to gas also had economic consequences. While initially expensive, requiring special taxes for its implementation and maintenance, gas lighting ultimately offered efficiencies that oil lamps could not match. The labor involved in maintaining the older systems, trimming wicks, lighting each lamp by hand, then extinguishing them again, was considerable. Gaslight reduced this burden significantly. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a new technology began to challenge gas: electricity. Electric lamps were cleaner, easier to control, and eventually cheaper to run than their gas-powered predecessors. The most significant advantage of electric lighting was its controllability. They could be switched on and off with ease, eliminating the need for armies of lamplighters who would become a familiar sight in cities across Europe. The transition to electric lighting was not immediate. Gas continued to be a dominant force for several decades. The initial cost of installing electrical infrastructure, generating stations, distribution networks, and individual lamps presented a significant barrier. Early electric systems also faced challenges in reliability. Initial generators were prone to failure, and the quality of electricity supply varied considerably. This meant that some cities maintained gas lighting as a backup system, ready to supplement or replace electric power during outages. Furthermore, entrenched interests within the gas industry actively resisted the shift, lobbying against policies favoring electrical development and emphasizing the perceived safety and reliability of their existing networks. The gradual adoption also reflected differing priorities among urban populations. While wealthier districts often embraced electricity first, poorer areas frequently lagged behind due to economic constraints and competing municipal needs. The transition was further complicated by the existing infrastructure of gas networks. Cities had invested heavily in pipes and distribution systems, making a complete switch to electricity economically challenging. While electric lighting offered advantages, the cost of decommissioning gasworks and replacing them with electrical generating stations proved substantial for municipal budgets. Moreover, the early adoption of electric lighting often occurred unevenly across urban landscapes. Wealthier residential districts and commercial centers were typically among the first to embrace the new technology, driven by a desire for enhanced convenience and prestige. However, poorer neighborhoods frequently lagged behind as local governments prioritized other pressing needs such as sanitation or housing improvements over widespread electrification. The pace of change also varied considerably between cities. Some embraced electricity with enthusiasm, while others maintained gas lighting for decades longer, often due to differing political climates and economic conditions. The transition to electric lighting didn't erase the legacy of gas and oil lamps entirely. As cities embraced new technologies, a recognition began to emerge that these older systems held significant cultural value. They represented an era of innovation, artistry, and even a certain romanticism about urban life. This led to efforts, albeit often localized and sporadic, to preserve examples of historical lanterns and gas lamps as tangible links to the past. Museums started incorporating these fixtures into their collections, showcasing them not just as lighting devices, but as artifacts reflecting technological progress and changing social landscapes. A Parisian réverbère, for instance, might be displayed alongside exhibits detailing the city's urban development in the 18th and 19th centuries. Similarly, examples of farola fernandina lamps, with their distinctive royal ciphers, became symbols of Spanish heritage, carefully maintained and exhibited to highlight a specific period in architectural history. The preservation wasn't always about restoring them to working order. Often, the focus was on maintaining their aesthetic integrity as historical objects. Beyond museums, some communities chose to retain certain gas lamps for symbolic reasons. In Spain, farola fernandina lamps continue to be found illuminating historic districts and squares, serving as a visual reminder of royal patronage and urban elegance. These weren't necessarily functioning lights. Rather, they were carefully preserved fixtures that contributed to the character of these areas. The very presence of these older lighting systems evoked a sense of continuity with the past, contrasting with the uniformity of modern electric streetlights, while simultaneously enriching the urban environment. They became visual markers of history, prompting reflection on how cities had evolved and the technologies that shaped their development. The preservation of these older lighting systems often involved a delicate balance between historical accuracy and practical considerations. While some museums prioritized complete restoration, attempting to replicate original manufacturing techniques and even fuel sources, this was frequently prohibitively expensive or technically challenging. Instead, many institutions opted for conservation efforts focused on stabilizing the existing materials and preventing further deterioration. This might involve cleaning surfaces without removing patina, repairing minor structural damage, and protecting fixtures from environmental factors like humidity and pollution. The symbolic value of these lamps extended beyond their representation of technological advancement. They also served as tangible links to specific historical events or social customs. In some cases, the very design of a lamp could evoke memories of particular eras or individuals. For example, the Farola Fernandina in Spain, with its royal cipher, became intrinsically associated with the reign of Ferdinand VII and the architectural style of his time. The presence of these fixtures served as a constant reminder of past rulers and their impact on urban development. Even when not fully functional, these preserved lamps contributed to the overall atmosphere of historic districts, creating a sense of continuity and offering visitors a glimpse into how cities once appeared. The careful maintenance of these objects demonstrated a commitment to preserving tangible connections with the past, acknowledging that they held significance far beyond their original purpose as sources of illumination. The evolution of street lighting extended far beyond Europe's initial innovations, appearing across the globe and adapted to suit local conditions and resources. Early forms of public lighting, utilizing oil lamps, served as security for travelers and deterring potential criminals in ancient civilizations like those of Greece and Rome. These practices were echoed in medieval towns, where link boys escorted people through dark streets. The introduction of glass-paned lanterns by Edmund Hemming in London and Jan van der Heyden in Amsterdam significantly improved light output, accelerating adoption throughout Europe. King Louis XIV's reforms in Paris during the 17th century resulted in over 2,000 streetlights by the end of the century, doubling that number by 1730. This Parisian model inspired other cities. London implemented public street lighting around the late 17th century. A considerably brighter oil lantern, called a reverbère, introduced in 1745, spurred further adoption. By the mid-19th century, gas lighting began its spread beyond Europe's borders. In 1816, Preston, Lancashire became the first place outside London in England to adopt gas lighting, and Baltimore, United States followed shortly after with a demonstration at Rembrandt Peale's museum. New Zealand also began utilizing gas streetlights in the 1860s. The first public street lighting using piped coal gas occurred in Pall Mall, London, in 1807. William Murdoch had earlier experimented with flammable gases and lit his own house in Cornwall in 1792. In 1812, a charter established the London and Westminster Gaslight and Coke Company. Less than 2 years later, Westminster Bridge was illuminated by gas. Preston followed suit shortly thereafter. Following this success, gas lighting spread both within Britain and abroad. The first electric streetlights in Paris were installed on the Avenue de l'Opéra and the Place de l'Étoile in 1878 to celebrate an exposition. In Newcastle, England, a demonstration of incandescent lighting occurred in 1879, marking that city as the first with electrically lit streets. Cleveland, Ohio, also demonstrated electric lighting around this time. In Paris, public street lighting was first installed on a covered shopping street, the Passage des Panoramas, in 1817. Private interior gas lighting had been previously demonstrated 17 years prior. The first gas lamps appeared on main Parisian streets in January 1829, extending to boulevards by 1857. A writer at that time noted the clarity of the new lighting. This widespread illumination contributed to Paris's nickname, the City of Light. Polish pharmacist Ignacy Łukasiewicz invented kerosene street lamps in 1853, and they were later used in Bucharest, Paris, and other European cities. He also established the world's first mine and refinery for kerosene production. During this period, lights were not always left on throughout the night or during moonlit periods. A German mayor opposed continuous lighting even when moonlight was present. A traditional design of gas streetlight, called a farola fernandina, remains popular in Spain. It is a neoclassical French style commemorating the birth date of Infanta Luisa Fernanda. The first electric street lighting employed arc lamps, initially developed by Pavel Yablochkov. Los Angeles installed arc lamps in 1876, and they subsequently spread to other locations, including Newcastle and Cleveland, Ohio. Later developments included incandescent lamps operated on series circuits, which were eventually replaced with high-intensity gas discharge lamps. For centuries, darkness dictated the rhythm of urban life. Once the sun set, towns and cities became a patchwork of shadows, limiting activity and shaping routines. People carried candles, oil lamps, or torches, often staying home to avoid uneven streets, potential thieves, and the simple difficulty of seeing where one was going. Authorities sometimes imposed curfews, partly due to challenges patrolling in darkness. The idea that an entire city should be illuminated at night developed gradually. Early attempts involved ordering residents to hang lanterns outside their homes on certain nights or during winter months, patchy measures demonstrating a slow recognition of lighting as a shared responsibility. As commerce grew and cities became busier, pressure increased for more usable nights. Inns, markets, and busy crossroads were the first places where permanent lights appeared, typically oil lamps requiring constant tending. By the 17th and 18th centuries, some European cities began installing coordinated systems of street lamps, mounting oil lamps on walls or posts at regular intervals. This proved expensive, leading to the introduction of special taxes to fund what was becoming a public service. The maintenance created new urban jobs. Lamp lighters and cleaners worked evenings and mornings trimming wicks, lighting each lamp by hand, and then extinguishing them again. Even imperfect lighting made a dramatic difference, improving navigation safety and encouraging evening activity in shops and coffee houses. Gaslight arrived in the early 19th century, flowing through underground pipes to lamps that burned brighter than oil lamps. Entire districts could be illuminated with fewer workers, creating vivid attractions like theaters and shop windows. Night began to feel like an extension of daytime city life rather than a separate, shadowy world. Better lighting pushed businesses to extend opening hours, increasing economic activity, but also lengthening working days for some. Not everyone welcomed the change. Some residents disliked paying new taxes. Others felt that bright nights disturbed natural rhythms or encouraged noisy nightlife. Debates around lighting were early versions of modern discussions about 24-hour cities and light pollution. Authorities noticed lit streets were easier to police as criminal activity was more visible. Lighting also allowed states to monitor public spaces more closely. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, electric lighting began replacing gas in many cities. Electric lamps were cleaner, easier to control, and eventually cheaper to run. They could be turned on and off with switches, removing the need for lamp lighters. Early incandescent lamps, while brighter than previous options, still required careful management. Decorative lampshades and switches became fashionable accessories as households adapted to this new technology. By the 1930s, electricity began appearing in new urban homes, although its reach remained uneven across Britain, particularly in rural areas. As noted by accounts from the Science Museum, early electric arc street lamps produced an intense light that was initially viewed with some apprehension. Robert Louis Stevenson described them as an ugly, blinding glare, contrasting them with the softer glow of gaslight. The transition wasn't immediate or universal. A BBC production once featured a comic scene where characters mistakenly attempted to light an electric fixture with a match, highlighting the lingering familiarity of older lighting methods. Even then, many homes retained limited electrical illumination, and adoption rates varied considerably depending on location and economic status. The shift also brought challenges. Early incandescent lamps required careful management. Today, knowing that bright nights are a recent invention can change how we think about them. For most of human history, darkness limited activity and shaped people's routines, fears, and imaginations. Modern conversations about dimming lights or restoring dark skies are part of a long tradition of negotiating what nights should feel like. If you walk through an older part of a city, look at lamp posts and brackets on walls. Decorative gas-style lanterns often trace routes that were once the first lit streets.